Psst, check this out. Hey there, welcome to another episode of the Back Channel. In today's episode, I want to cover a concept that's come up in a lot of the different coaching sessions that I've been in. So if you guys know, I'm put in the situation to guide founders a lot around their narratives. Sometimes it's in my private community. Sometimes I'm invited to be an outside coach. Sometimes it's random one-on-ones that come through an introduction. Can you help this founder? And this concept that has come up repeatedly is basically the idea that a lot of founders skip over a really important step in ensuring that a pitch goes well, ensuring that you actually have a relatively good chance of getting an investor to lean in and want to do more. And that is making sure at first that they care, okay? So I want to talk about that concept and then start talking about some of the things that you could do to make sure you get to that step and knock that part out of the park. So making sure that they care. Well, initially, what I think happens is that founders don't think, oh, I need to get them to care. They think, I need to get them to be impressed. That's often the thing that people go to. It's like, well, if I'm impressive, if I show them all this complicated knowledge, they'll be like, this person is worth investment, which is just not the case. In fact, if you start with, let's get them to be impressed, you're going to get an investor that probably is going to be confused. Because a lot of people try to lean into this idea of like, well, let me show them how deep my expertise is, as opposed to the simple sort of spoon-feeding feeling that we need to share basic information to make sure that they care. So where this becomes complicated is making sure someone cares is associated with making sure that they know the context for the problem space. And this can be very hard as a founder because you know it and it's second nature to you, but it can be kind of hard to understand, well, when it goes from me, deep expert, to the next level down of maybe arm's length aware or 2 arm lengths away of don't know anything about the space, where are those lines? Because within the founder's head, they just don't know where those lines are. So how do you figure that out? One thing I learned running my last venture-backed startup is your lawyers really matter. Some founders like to glaze over this decision, but don't do that. It's really important. Last time I used Gunderson Detmer, and I definitely do it again. They weren't just transactional, they really felt like they were part of a team. There's a legal perspective on almost everything you're doing at a startup, so they're involved in everything from fundraising to equity comp to hiring to commercial contracts, really everything. And Gunderson is really built for the early stage. They work with more startups and VC firms than anyone else, over 3,500 companies, 500 funds, and they've been ranked the top VC law firm for over a decade. So if you're raising, scaling, or just trying not to mess up that first safe when you go out fundraising, Gunderson Detmer can help you navigate it all so you can focus on what really matters, which is building a great business, growing that great business. So if you'd like to learn more about Gunderson Detmer, check out gunder.com. One of the ways I like to do this is by saying, okay, instead of figuring out where that line is first, let's first describe what would my ideal investor be? And when I say ideal, I mean, what would the profile of an investor who just gets it right away be? Like, what would they have done in their first jobs? What would they have studied? What personal experiences would they have had in order to deeply understand this? Where when I start telling my story, they're like, oh man, I don't need any background. They just get it. So for example, if we were trying to, think of the perfect investor for Adamant, my company that is focused on making fundraising easier and more accessible for founders and fund managers. Well, if I had to think about somebody who would be great and understand, what would some of the things that they understand be? I kind of want them to be more of a technically minded person, maybe not sales oriented where they have that inclination and experience around like process and getting things done. So maybe more of a builder. I'd think about that. It would be nice if they had been on both sides of the table, right? They had been an investor, so they understand what it takes to get that done. They've also tried to raise capital before. Hopefully they would have had struggles fundraising, even though they were on the investor side. So they understand how deep that problem is. And maybe they got to a stage where fundraising, multiple rounds really unlocked huge growth. And because of that, they would understand, wow, fundraising is such an important part of this equation. It actually can unlock a lot of growth, a lot of transformation within the founder and the company to get to huge success points. And then maybe they IPO'd their company. And so the whole range of experiences baked into this person's head. Well, the reason I think creating that profile is important is you're like, okay, so that's their profile. Now, what out of those things that that person has is so important? What are the things that they understand that unlocks this like great excitement? Well, it's probably the real deep pain. It's probably the fact, this insight that even if you were a VC, it's still hard to fundraise. It still takes a lot of time. And maybe it's that insight around the transformation that occurs when you have capital to learn with. So I would want to be able to distill some of those building blocks and be like, you know what? I want to make sure they hear a story or they understand these pieces ahead of time. And if I talk to a bunch of people, I find out which one of these pieces of information is actually not universally understood. And when we can drill into and dial into those small things, you can start creating an initial fundraising narrative or the way you present what you're doing in such a way that your first few beats are focused on making sure they understand and that you can get them to care, so that when you start talking about what you're actually doing, they're like, oh, I know why I should care. I know what the opportunity is. I know that this is something I should be spending more time in. Okay. So that's an idea of how you would get to understanding what you need to share in terms of getting them to care. The other thing I think is important to clarify is, what does it mean to care and why could they care? Well, there are a bunch of reasons that they could care. One big one is if they don't understand your space, if you're working in early stage education, or if you're working in HR tech, or if you're working in battery tech, these narrowly focused things, well, they might not understand just how big the opportunity is. And if they are locked in some sort of preconceived notion that this is a small market, well, they're not going to care because they're venture capitalists and they're underwriting to 100x returns. So one thing you need to make sure is that, or one way you can get them to care is that they obviously see, holy crap, there's a big opportunity. What's another way? Another way to get them to care is if they see in you the fact that the person speaking will tell me something that could be worthwhile. Some of that could be, well, your experience in the back, your experience previous to this company shows that you know what a venture scale opportunity is and that is what you would be building. And if you can build that credibility or demonstrate that right away, well, then the immediate jump to why I should care is, well, this person that I'm speaking to wouldn't be pitching, wouldn't be sharing an idea for investment if they weren't pitching something that was big, and they wouldn't choose this option out of all the things that they could do if it weren't massive. So maybe I should lean in. That's the personality credibility that can get somebody to care. And then another part of this whole thing, a combination of both the opportunity and the person, is demonstrating an unfair advantage. If there is an insight or an expertise or a secret that they are able to share early on, where you're like, wow, that does feel like an edge that could be leveraged to something really big. Well, that gets someone to listen more. It could be like, well, that's a crazy edge, and I want to see, is there an opportunity to leverage this edge to something big enough for venture returns? Or that is a crazy edge. Are they also somebody that has the experience and the ability to execute? Those are enough curiosities that would allow someone to lean in to care, so they listen to the rest of the pitch. The last thing I'll say in the idea of getting someone to care early on is that remember that when we are pitching or sharing materials or doing anything within a fundraise, especially early on, our only goal is to make sure that the audience wants to continue listening, that they want to turn the page, that they want to learn more. We don't need to close the deal. We don't need them to get them to sign a check immediately. We just need to get them to care enough to want to learn more. Okay, so hopefully you think about this idea of making sure you get your audience to care. You don't skip over checking whether or not you're good at getting people to care, because, well, that's the first step in closing an investment. Well, I hope this was helpful, and I hope I get a chance to see you on the next episode of the Back Channel.